So Star Trek boldly went where so many other shows went before. Off into cancellation. And normally that would be the end of it, but, well, the show just couldn't really die. And did pretty damn good numbers in syndication. And for news shows to have to compete with reruns was quite extraordinary. So that's not going to go unnoticed. So they knew there was a market there for this property. And, of course, the cartoon show was done. But there was a hunger for something more. And Roddenberry had petitioned to why not do a feature film adaptation of it. And so that was looked at. But yeah, the idea was, let's revive the TV show. And besides, that's the home from Star Trek, and the desire for it is the syndication numbers were good. Well, let's just build on that, and we'll have a new show. And so it was that was that. They were off and running. They started Star Trek Phase 2 was what it was called. And they managed to get all the original cast members, with the exception of Leonard Nimoy, who said he'd had enough of Mr. Spock and thought it had ruined his career and everything because he was typecast as the character. Didn't want to return to it. And so there's footage, test footage of them setting up the new Star Trek show. And that was available on the Blu-ray extras and stuff, and I'm sure it's probably on YouTube around and wherever. But some sets were actually constructed. The uniforms look pretty much like the old show, and even new characters like Ilea was in it, and of course I guess he was Lieutenant Commander Zahn, who was Spock's replacement. The Vulcan, or I think he was half Vulcan, half Romulan, something like that. But yeah, he was the Vulcan with the mullet. Whatever. And so they wrote quite a few scripts for the first season, and some of those ended up becoming script, or at least concepts rather. Maybe it was the full idea anyway for Star Trek The Next Generation. And a lot of Star Trek The Next Generation took templates from what was supposed to be this series. Specifically, Ilea is Counselor Troy, and Decker becomes Riker, so on and so forth. And that's how that stuff got repurposed and utilized later. But on the way to television, a funny thing happened. Star Wars happened, and it was ginormous. And then, other sci-fi films, Close Encounters of the Third Kind did very well at the time. So what do we got? I said, well, we're working on this Star Trek TV series. And like, all right, stop that, turn it back into a movie. So apparently that's the story, more or less how it went. And they decided to go with the pilot of the Star Trek Phase 2 to be the plot of this new Star Trek film. And the pilot was the title, In Thy Image. So it's something of a reunion movie, a celebration of Star Trek, of course. We see the members come back together. Kirk is now Admiral Kirk, and quite a few of the cast are still in the service. Scotty is still working on the Enterprise. They're refitting it, more advanced technology and whatnot. It's a completely different ship now, because even in the story, Kirk gets lost in it. And Sulu's there, Uhura's there, and Chekhov's there. But Spock and Bones, they're not there. Well, Bones left the service, but then Kirk pulled some strings and got him, basically drafted back into it. Because there's an emergency going on. And Spock is off trying to shed his human half entirely, but he senses another intelligence and he can't do it. So he returns, but he's still in the throes of this, trying to deny his human half. So he's very cold to everybody at the outset of the film when he returns to the ship and all that. So they've got this emergency. It's a mysterious cloud, apparently, and it's just wiping people out. So we start off with Klingons, and boy, do they look different. They've had some makeovers. This is the first time we see that, because they were competing with Star Wars and the like, so they were like, we're going to do a little more than that and make them look more alien. So since then, the Enterprise is the series that dealt with it in a pretty clever way of trying to explain that. And so, which is fine. So, but that's basically what it was, make them more alien looking and stuff like that. And also, hey, look at all the toys we can sell. And so a lot of you thought, there's going to be this battle between the Enterprise and Klingon ships. Nah, it was just a couple of Klingon ships taking on the Cloud, but the Cloud was far more powerful than they were and wiped them all out. So the Federation's watching this, and they're like, I guess this Cloud thing is pretty serious. And because it's on a course for Earth, so they're starting to panic. The Federation space station that monitors this and reports back to Starfleet and all that. Well, apparently, I guess he was the commander of that space station or whatever, but it's the actor who would have played Zahn in the TV series, but he doesn't survive this. No, he doesn't. The Cloud eats him too, and the whole space station. So, meanwhile, Kirk wants Spock back, but he can't get him, so he wants a Vulcan science officer as his science officer. And so there is this Vulcan they briefly introduced, but he dies in a transporter accident. He doesn't get split in two or anything like that. No, apparently they don't show you the ultimate fate, but apparently he beams back to the station, unable to beam onto the Enterprise as a pile of ground beef or something, And so it's all very sad. This is one of the weaknesses in the show. It's not a problem with demonstrating it. It's all there to demonstrate there's problems with the ship. It's not ready to go, and Kirk it's an emergency. We've got to go now, and this makes him run into conflict with Captain Decker, who is now captain in this version. I imagine he would have been Commander Decker in the TV show, but he's the son of Commodore Decker from the Doomsday Machine episode. And so he's got a legacy to live up to and also to overcome because of how badly things ended for Matt Decker. So he's the captain, and then Kirk comes in and takes it away from him. So he's not too thrilled with that. And then all of a sudden an old girlfriend comes in, follically challenged Ilea. But she has some sort of empathic abilities from her people, and they only demonstrate that a little because later on Chekhov gets injured, and she eases his pain while Nurse Chapel, apparently she's Dr. Chapel now, so she's, she has some cameos there. Grace Lee Whitney has a cameo, Yeoman Rand, but I'm assuming she has a higher rank by now. She's the one operating the transporter when the Vulcan and some other officer gets cooked. Yeah. But, so it was fine that the transporter failure demonstrates that the ship's not quite ready, but it's kind of redundant as they demonstrated again later, but that's not the problem. The problem comes later on when they beam McCoy on. So they're beaming more crew members on, and then Kirk gets a message that, this one officer refuses to beam over. He didn't want his atoms getting scrambled or whatever. And Kirk kind of chuckles at this because he already knows who it is. And he goes over there like it's all silly. You just had two crew members get barbecued. It's not really the time to be being funny about it. So I don't know. They did it because it emphasizes the humorous aspects of Dr. McCoy, but you needed to find something else. Because McCoy's, of course he's right. He's like, why couldn't he ride the shuttle over to the ship? But, they just say, hey, it's silly. Bones is being a scaredy cat. Well, who can blame him? I mean, did they at least mop the transporter pad before he beams over? I mean, oof. So, it's a bit of a problem. But later on, they keep demonstrating that Kirk, because he's obsessed with the Enterprise. He wants to get back in it. He feels like his life is being wasted. And the timeline within it demonstrates that I think they say like Kirk's been behind a desk for 2 years. And it seems to indicate that the 5-year mission had happened, and then he got promoted to admiral, and he's got this desk job on Earth. And so it's been 2 years since the 5-year mission had ended. You know, it's actually been like about 10 years or so since thereabouts when the show ended. But for the purposes of the timeline within the motion picture, they just have it like it's only been 2 years since that mission ended, which it's just interesting to note how it takes place. When you get to Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, it seems to insinuate a lot more time has passed since this era of Star Trek, and so I always thought it'd be kind of interesting. There's comic books and novels and stuff that continued on in this version of Star Trek with, you know, the gray uniforms and all that type of stuff, and so it's kind of interesting that there's a bit amount of time of yet a second mission for this crew in that era of it and all that. So, you know, it's there's little interesting things here and there that you can you know, expand upon in your own headcanon, if you so desire. And it's not so much headcanon as it is, like I said, there was comic books and novels and stuff based off of that version of Star Trek. So eventually the gang's all together because they've got this terrible emergency. They don't know how to stop it. And eventually, of course, the crew of the Enterprise figures out how to avoid getting fried as well. There's a wormhole incident they have where they almost get destroyed because, again, Kirk doesn't understand the ship as well as Decker. And so that, you know, that's the conflict there. But ultimately, Kirk's the more seasoned, better commander of the ultimate mission. It's just, you know, he was going to be reliant on Decker until Spock showed up, and then Decker's just there to you know, oogle Aliyah, his old girlfriend. Or, well, actually they weren't. It's the weird thing. She comes on the ship and they all like, oh, hey, well, welcome aboard, you know. And then she says, my vow of celibacy is on record. It's like, none of you are going to get it on with me. I guess. I don't know. But obviously she only had eyes for Decker. But unfortunately, she gets fried and disintegrated by the cloud. It sends over a living lightning bolt, I suppose, a probe of some sort, examines them all and decides to take Aliyah. Now, I guess you'd assume that it was attracted to Aliyah because of her empathic abilities and that sort of thing. And perhaps it chose her to be the form for it to interact with the humans on the ship, which it refers to as the carbon-based units. So that might be. But the whole thing is, well, and this is a thing you see in a lot of science fiction when this sort of thing happens. The probe copied Aliyah way too well, or what have you, because she ends up having feelings for Decker. And ultimately, that's how the whole show ends with them two. But the overall plot and the big reveal is the cloud is at the function of this giant ship that is a machine-based life form, you know, and others have theorized that this might be a precursor to the Borg, or it was the Borg, or, you know, well, whatever. But ultimately, it's taking the plot from the Changeling. This was an old Star Trek episode, and I don't know if they were just unaware of this or what, but it's the same idea. Now, the events within each are different, but the Changeling is when this entity was just destroying other ships and people and stuff. It was very powerful, but it was just this small little robot. And then eventually they realized that it's an amalgam of two different technologies, one being this alien technology, and the other being their own. It was an old Earth probe launched out, and then it was some foresight on their part that they knew NASA would get around to doing something like that, I suppose. Probably talked about it, but they hadn't yet at the time. But still, it was the idea. And then later in the 70s, we did do that. You know, you had these Voyager satellites to eventually they did go into deep space. And so the idea is one of them got out there, and we never saw it again. And then it came upon this machine race who thought they were encountering a similar creature of their own, and they fixed it up. But its original mission was to learn as much as it could and transmit it back to Earth, which is what it was doing until it came upon these cybernetic creatures. And so that's the ultimate plot. And so, it's Voyager 6, the last probe that was sent, and all this stuff. But due to some damage on the insignia, or the letters on the outside of the old satellite, it called itself Voyager. So that's what it was. And it's also the concepts of man and God, and trying to reconnect with that, and it wants to touch the face of God, and little did it know that God was the human race, and it had a hard time accepting that. But ultimately, that's what drove Decker to join with Voyager in a new form of life that would journey to higher planes of existence, or whatever. Whatever. I mean, that was the origin of the Q continuum. But that's what they did. So it's a fine science fiction concept. That's more of what a Star Trek story should be. But the problem is they'd already done it. The movie is too long. But that's all they did. No. There's a lot of scenery to it, and to grasp the enormity of the Voyager craft and all that, I understand that, but it doesn't need to be repetitive in it over and over again. You get the idea pretty quickly, and just a bunch of scenes of them staring at the screen, and wow, and then nothing, just to get to an old concept they'd already done. So there's an awful lot of weaknesses here, and that's a big one. I don't know what the problem was with the others. I guess the other scripts were just based on it being a part of a series. And this one wasn't. This was the only one, because it was supposed to introduce the new show. So this is one they went with. And it was obviously something crafted for an episode of television with less than an hour. They had to stretch it somehow for the movie. So there's some elements in it that's interesting. It's cool. The look of it is interesting, because actually, even though it's all rather gray and drab, it's kind of a callback to the look of the Enterprise and the uniforms and whatnot from the Cage with Jeffrey Hunter's Captain Pike, where there's a color scheme in the uniforms, but it's all rather muted and rather drab, until later on they did it where it was more brighter colors and whatnot. But this one, where you have the basic, there's these sort of gray outfits, and then there's sort of a tan one, and then there's a white one. So it's still a color scheme of which departments on the ship you're supposed to be a part of, and that type of thing. And so there's a lot of interest there. It's not like this something you should just abandon altogether. The Wrath of Khan is the superior film, obviously. But the stronger element of motion picture is its sci-fi concept, which is front and center and the most prevalent of all the Star Trek films. And that makes it closer to the show in a lot of ways than even Wrath of Khan. Which Wrath of Khan, it has the Genesis Project ideas in it and stuff like that, which fits in, and that could have been a Star Trek episode as well. But in this one, that's what they were pursuing, and they were thinking more along trying to make it akin to 2001 and these high concept sci-fi ideas. And they're not wrong on that. And the attempt is, worth its respect, but the problem again is that you already did it. And there's just no way out of it, Some of the redos, and they revamped the effects and some of it. They prettied up some things here and there. Other things, I don't know. It's kind of off. It's like there's this conversation between McCoy and Kirk, and the background in the ship just doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't look that great. And then there's like the Vulcan. They spruced that up a bit, but at other times I don't know. But it's more than what it was originally, so I guess it's an improvement. But beyond that, I think the overall story and the running time is probably they just didn't have enough to fill that out to make it more of a complete film in and of itself, because they just couldn't put a less than an hour long movie out in theater. But you know, what are you gonna do? So it's not a Star Trek film you should pass on seeing. I think it deserves that. There's far worse Star Trek films, and because there's good stuff in this, and it holds a special place for its significance to the overall Star Trek franchise and that sort of thing. And like I said, there's a lot of more elements in it that's more Star Trek than the later films are, and it's just unfortunate they got kind of lost in the wash, I guess. I don't know, but it has some rather large flaws in it, and I'm just not going to ignore that because it's Star Trek. As much as I love Star Trek, and I remember the excitement at the time, and oh boy, a Star Trek movie and all that. I had the Happy Meal and all that stuff. Still have a little toy Enterprise they sold at the time. I kind of had to, not kind of, I had to glue it back together because stupid young Doug broke it. But anyway, so it brought Star Trek back from out of the wilderness, more so than a cartoon show. Don't know how a TV series would have gone. Looking at some of that test footage, it kind of reminded me of sets from the Buck Rogers TV series. But I guess it wouldn't have mattered because I would hope that 70s Star Trek would have a little more intellect to it. But there was a lot of too much silliness in that, and to a lesser degree, like Battlestar Galactica and stuff like that. Even though it had a pretty good budget, but so who knows? We'll never know. I guess in some alternate universe, Phase 2 happened, and they know whether the show was any good. But that's another time. And it wouldn't have looked like this. I guess the Enterprise would have. I think that was the design they were going for. But apparently they were going to go with the old uniforms, So, but anyway, Star Trek, the motion picture, which should have been Star Trek in Thy Image, I guess. But they wanted to say, hey, look, it's a Star Trek movie. So, so that's the title of the first Star Trek film. So, but anyway, that's how they got the ball rolling on the second life of Star Trek.